Magic. I scribbled down on my notes, trying to come up with theories and possibilities while thinking about other things to test. I returned to my notes on the qi refining process, going through the various factors I'd listed out. There was the temperature, the properties of the herbs themselves that formed the pill. The time spent in the cauldron was the mixture of various ingredients, which wasn't much like chemistry outside of herbology or cooking. Just throw the herbs in, mesh and blend together, and it was done. The problem was in narrowing down the factors that made the pill work. There was the essence of the herbs themselves, that is to say, the qi in them, which gave the pill its ability. The time spent in refining was solely focused on drawing the qi out of these ingredients and melding them. The melding process was where things tended to get drastic. A small mistake in coaxing the qi together could at times make the qi explode outward. The interaction between the various qi of the herbs and their bodies was dependent on both how I manipulated my qi and how well I maintained the flame and a qi pressure around them. The qi pressure was what I'd named the process of surrounding the cauldron with my qi and pushing from all sides uniformly. It sort of worked like an ideal gas in that sense, where it followed the gas laws of pressure, though I doubt it did so as an ideal gas would. The fact pressure increased the boiling point seemed to be true. There was a very fine margin of pressure under which qi mixed together well with one another, melding into a singular, uniform solution that formed the pill. But so far, I'd been unable to replicate my one-time success. Maybe if I find some sort of reactive reagent of qi? Perhaps treating the qi as a chemical reaction would be better, treating each element's qi as a separate chemical to be mixed in a reaction. Could try feeding some qi to the rat to see how my qi reacts with a spirit animal. A chittering voice broke me from my thoughts. The rat was climbing up my leg, its nose sniffing around my pouch. Bad, bad rat, stay put. To my surprise, it climbed back down to the ground. Perhaps it was smarter than I'd thought. I was contemplating what to do with the rat. Perhaps teach it to come to me for food every so often. I hummed to myself in thought about the little critter I'd caught, when it used the most ferocious move any creature could use: the cuteness attack. Its little pink nose twitched as it let out the most pitiful squeak I'd ever heard. My defenses started to crumble. I steadied my heart and looked it in the eye with a stern expression. Two black, beady eyes stared back as it lifted one paw, rubbing it against my leg. My heart melted. The cute meter exploded from overdose. I tried to resist, yet all was futile against those pitiful eyes, their cuteness surpassing all under the heavens. I dug out a little bit of my remaining pill residue, handing it over. The rat gladly began to chomp down on its feast. You evil, smart little creature. I'd say you'd make a fine assistant. I think I have just the name for you as well. Lab rat. That'll be your name. Labby for short. I gently pet its head, and Labby squeaked. Perhaps out of delight from the petting or the pill I'd given it. Got my first cultivation pet. Time to catch 'em all? I smiled, snorting at my own lame reference. A horde of ideas began to flood me. The possibilities of being able to test on a spirit animal excited me. I wouldn't harm Labby, he was too precious. And I wasn't cruel enough to kill something I'd named. No, Labby would live as my assistant as I broke down the mysteries behind his magic. Labby froze from my glance his way. I flashed a grin that even I knew must have looked quite evil. We're gonna have some fun times together, my new friend. The little rat squeaked quietly, and I cackled with all my mad scientist glory. I would untangle each mystery this world had to offer. Beware, ye secrets of magic. I come for you. Chapter 6. A Peaceful Day. The sizzling of food filled my ears. I stirred the large pot of vegetables around, occasionally picking up a couple of logs to throw into the campfire. "Got anything, Labby?" I got a squeak from the little rat in reply. Labby scurried closer, a little plant filled with chi in its mouth. "Good boy," I praised Labby, petting him once before I let him back out again. I stored the herb in my pouch, returning my attention back to my lunch. I'd come out into a little forest area near the backside of the sect. The Cloudy Peak sect, quite aptly with its name, was situated on two cloudy hills, the smaller hill being the outer sect where I was, and the larger one being the inner sect compound. The amount of land combined under the sect's control was massive, spanning around both hills as it spread into a forest, all of which was within the sect's premises. The city outside was a 5-minute cultivator walk away. I'd decided to spend my cultivation time with something far more productive, gathering spirit herbs. Labby had proven his worth as he'd quickly sniffed out the spirit herbs among the regular plants and herbs. The gathered spirit herbs weren't potent, unlike what the spirit garden would produce. These wild spirit plants contained minimal chi and were quite weak, but they were also relatively easily found, making them perfect for testing. I stirred the vegetables and meat fry once more, its scent filling my nostrils. "Nothing quite like campfire food," I smiled, humming a random song, and sprinkled some of the spirit herbs into the food. Any outer disciple would have gasped in horror at that, except Labby had got me quite a few spirit herbs today, enough to create the needed pills for my deal with Su Lin, and have a few spares for testing to care too much. With a flick of my wrist, I made the fire go away and picked up my bowl beside me on the grass. I smiled smugly at the little trick I'd learned from the old man for starting a fire under the cauldron. Starting the fire was quite simple, just needed to focus on where I wanted to concentrate my chi and envision it turning warm. The chi would provide enough energy to start combustion in whatever fuel you were providing it. The process made me wonder how exactly the energy transfer would work, and further questions on how people even controlled their chi. Though I wasn't going to be solving all mysteries in one day, was I? Putting out the flame had been a bit trickier. I had to direct my chi fast enough over the flames that a layer formed for an instant over the wood, cutting the oxygen supply, and the fire died instantly. I served myself the fried meat and vegetables, taking a little bowl out for Labby as well. A gentle breeze blowing through the grassy plains brought a smile to my face. The air here was fresher, and the chi of the land surrounded me. No doubt the sect had been located here due to the chi present in its environments. Labby came closer with another squeak, carrying a cut-off herb. I saw a few chewed leaves at the end, and shook my head as I took the herb from its mouth and gave it a pet in thanks. "You can eat the food too if you want to," I said, holding out his small bowl of my homemade recipe of stir-fry, poor college student edition. Labby's little nose twitched a couple times as he inspected it, before digging in. I sighed contently, eating my lunch out in the open. A couple of animals curiously walked by from the denser tree groves nearby, but none were curious enough to come out into the open grasslands. I soaked in the sights around me, marveling at the mystical magic of chi that flowed all over this place. Following a whim, I took out my notes, taking a look under the section where I'd tried to test if it were possible to make spirit herbs grow faster with chi. I stared at the problems, the drying leaves, the shimmering energy, and a whole bunch of messy notes. Leafing through the pages, my eyes wandered over the text, yet not reading them. An instinct called out to me, and I began to channel my chi. It swirled in my dantian, rotating in circles, and the chi of the land began to soak into my veins. I kept reading through my notes, idly remarking on portions. Time flew by in a daze. The wind was telling me something. There was something wrong with my chi. I frowned, still lost in a strange trance as the words faded across the wind. I absently held a quill, the answer becoming obvious, and wrote something down. 2 circles, one flowing into the other, like an infinite, never-ending loop. I changed the pattern, and something shifted inside of me. 1 circle, 2 circles. The chi swirled. 15 circles. 16 circles. Something began to form in my dantian. 80 circles. 81 circles. With a pop, the chi settled and my sight came back into focus. The chi within my dantian changed, and as if with a sigh, the chi of the land began to flow into me. The wind flowed through my hair for a while before my mind finally broke free of the daze it had been stuck in. Labby slept quietly on my lap. I smiled, gently petting his head as I put the rat into the herb basket. Stretching my limbs out, I stood. I looked at the sky, noticing the high midday sun. It had been hours since I'd started. Must have lost track of time. I had felt that writing in my notes was strangely meditative, but wow. Labby squeaked, peeking over the basket. Yeah, little buddy. Sorry about the delay. Let's go now, I said, packing my stuff up and cleaning up my little campfire, when something caught my attention. Is the grass longer here? I stared at the grass under my feet. For a few feet around me, the grass was marginally longer than everywhere else. The wind bent the grass, merging them all into a single green blanket. I shrugged, chalking it up to an optical illusion of some kind. Labby chittered, playing with the spirit herbs in the basket. One sat on its head like a crown. I laughed, feeling strangely at peace. It was time to do some alchemy experiments. Chi stirred within the cauldron, its contents bubbling and frothing, more like a witch's poison than any life-saving elixir. Stirring the liquid lightly, I kept adding my own chi to the mixture. The smoke from the potion stung my eyes when it gushed forth, the herbs letting their essence out as they began to mix into the solution and turn homogeneous. I continued my stirring, keeping my speed even. This was my 6th recipe on making a chi refilling elixir, having shifted my focus from making pills to an elixir. I'd found the saturation point of water for chi was much higher than that of spirit herbs, which was a bit strange since herbs should naturally contain a lot of water in their cells. In just a cup worth of water, I could drain all of my chi and the water would hold it, so long as I didn't boil it away. Unlike water, steam sucked at holding chi whatsoever. I didn't have any ice to test with, but suspected the same was true with that as well. My theory so far was that chi was an intermediate stage of energy, a transition element of sorts, where it was on me to guide how the energy was applied. The reason steam couldn't hold on to my chi was due to the particles being far too excited, making the chi excited and unable to properly mesh. Similar to mixing sugar in hot water, the chi could dissolve in hot water, but impossible to do so in steam. It was just a hypothesis for now. I'd need to run a lot more tests before I could prove any of this, but I felt like I was moving in the right direction. With a bubbling noise, the chi within the cauldron poured forth. The smoke contained leftover chi that had begun rising. I'd reached the saturation point. Taking out a couple of the spirit herbs from yesterday, I gently added them to the mixture, stirring evenly while increasing the chi pressure inside the cauldron. There was a light shimmer to the green potion now, and I was starting to think the herb's shimmering glow was just the layer of water molecules on its leaves latching onto the chi as they evaporated through the pores. "Labby, can you get me that flower?" I called out, keeping my eyes on the cauldron and pointing toward the flower on the nearby shelf. Labby chittered, climbing up the wooden shelf and grabbed the flower. Taking a small run, he leapt from his perch, landing on my knee before he climbed up to my shoulders, flower in its mouth. The best lab assistant ever. "Thank you," I said, gently petting Labby. He jumped back down, going off to do whatever he was doing. I looked to the spirit lotus petals in my hand. This was the part that made me nervous. The alchemy book detailed the spirit lotus to have earth and water chi, similar to the muddy waters it grew in. The properties from those chi enabled the ability to sustain and coagulate chi into them. The lotus petal was usually used in pills to bind the chi together. It was a common ingredient. The regular method of brewing the chi refilling elixir simply involved pouring in spirit herbs and holding the solution at the right chi pressure while melding in my own chi, waiting for it to dissolve, and then slowly boiling the excess water away. My intention was to use the lotus petal to increase its capacity. The old man would have probably frowned had he been here. Another reason why I'd asked permission to get a small cauldron for my own chamber, where I could experiment freely. I took a breath and let the petals fall into the potion. Nerves racked me, waiting for the reaction to go horribly wrong and splash me with boiling water. But the petals simply floated in the bubbling solution, starting to break down. The musty smell of earthy chi hit my nose, and I hurriedly started to churn my chi through the solution. My heart began beating faster as my chi turned thicker. I added more intensity to the flame under the cauldron, and the water began to boil faster. Labby chittered from behind me, almost as if sharing my nervous excitement, and I smiled. This was the fun part. Chi gushed forth, swirling on its own now. A whirlpool of chi formed. The earth essence was heavier than normal chi, refusing to be moved by my meager chi as it started to form a lump at the center. Panic began to grow in my heart. The cauldron started to turn hotter and hotter. The chi was swirling. The solution began to glow. I dimmed the flame, focusing all my attention on the cauldron as I tried to spread the earthen chi uniformly through the solution. The chi spread under my will, mixing in with the essence of the spirit herbs, and the energy began to focus. With a pop, the cauldron shuddered, a cloud of smoke spewing forth from the potion. I coughed, taking a step back. My eyes watered from the smoke, the chi burning my nostrils and throat. First, clearing my vision, I walked closer, and my heart dropped. Clumps floated in the potion, bobbing up and down in the now brown and murky liquid. The earthen chi hadn't spread properly, binding the solid particles of the solution into clumps. I let out a dejected sigh, about to drain it into a bottle to store away, when I heard Labby squeak. With a jump, the little rat stood on my shoulder before leaping into the cauldron. I panicked, my hands shooting out to grab him when he expertly grabbed on to the cauldron's rim. He dunked his little head into the potion while taking a drink. A happy chitter sounded out as Labby sipped the potion. My heart fluttered. The layer of brown gunk floated away, revealing the bright green potion underneath. Realization hit me the very next moment. The earthen chi sucked out not the herbs or their chi, but the gunk from the cauldron and the low-grade spirit herbs instead. I skimmed the filth away. Taking out a porcelain container, I poured the light green potion in. Grabbing the elixir, I swirled it once and took a small sip. Chi rushed through my body, filling up my dantian. I grinned at my first successful experimental potion. Quest complete. Reward is a caffeine substitute, I said, snickering as Labby squeaked, licking his paws for the little remaining bits of elixir left on them. I shook my head, still smiling from my successful results as I turned back toward the cauldron. I needed to make notes on the process and increase its success rate. This was my first step toward making a working formula for the brewing and even the refining process. There was no way I could stop smiling even if I tried. I took another sip from the elixir, feeling the refreshing energy travel through my body, before I closed the bottle and put it away. It was time to crank out some cultivator energy drinks. Chapter 7. Totally not drug trafficking. Wrinkles upon wrinkles merged into one as the old man stared at the green elixir in my hand where I knelt. He hummed thoughtfully, eyes narrowing to two dark slits hidden under his wrinkly face. I kept my expression straight. The fact I wasn't smiling with a smug expression impressed me a lot. Though my cheeks hurt from having smiled the whole time I'd tested the new elixir against the previous version for chi replenishing potency and time taken for activation. My tests showed it was around 4% more potent than the normal version and 9% faster. That may not seem like much, if not for the fact I'd only barely just started learning alchemy. Results like this may have been a fluke for now, but it was extremely promising nonetheless for the potential of further development. Even back home, chemistry began as alchemy and the desire to create gold. Same with the immortality chase and herbal science in Asia. Both fields were fueled by the greed of the rich and powerful, yet both were eventually led to become something far more valuable to humanity and a way to study the world around us. If I could show the potential alchemy possessed, research it and break it down in an understandable way, then perhaps I could spark a change in this world as well. I doubt it would happen in my lifetime. Successfully managing to break down the mysteries behind this world within my lifetime was an unknown. But that didn't matter. Even just a start would be enough. And this was a cultivation world. Perhaps I'd pick up enough tidbits to live a bit longer. Worth it if it let me further my research. "So you've done it, despite my warnings then," the old man said. I nodded and he sighed, taking the porcelain bottle and swirling it once. "Did you succeed in improving the recipe, Lu Jie?" the old man asked. "Somewhat. There's a lot to be improved even now. It's marginally better and slightly more cost-efficient." Old man continued to stare at my elixir. "Do you know why trying to improve these recipes is frowned upon, Lu Jie?" the old man asked. I shook my head, straightening up slightly. Something about the tone of his voice made me worry. "The ancestors, who established the 7 celestial peaks from which the Cloudy Peaks sect branch was formed, had also formed a vault of alchemy. It is now run by a council of elders and holds many of the recipes our ancestors left behind." The old man's voice was fraught. "They safeguard the recipes, and the commonly available alchemical books only contain the simplified versions. Any alternate brewings are shut down and added to the vaults." I'd expected this, partially at the very least. It was difficult not to. No matter how backward the technology might be, these alchemists and cultivators lived for centuries and are leagues better than what I can do with my own chi. Something as simple as mixing the spirit lotus into the elixir wouldn't remain untested for such a long period of time. The obvious answer, I'd concluded, was that some powerful figure was controlling the recipes present in the market. I've known a few who'd still continued, trying to explore the depths their knowledge and gifts would take them. They usually die by some misfortune or in some explosion from their elixirs or pills, the old man said, handing me the bottle of elixir back. "Do you really wish to continue down this path, Lu Jie? It isn't too late. You can climb much higher than this old man ever did. I've seen the drive in your eyes, boy. But it doesn't have to go against the elders to pursue that path." The old man's voice was heavy and tired. I think he knew my answer, and the concern in his expression hurt me. I stared at my elixir. I could go through the hoops, live as an alchemist under the sect, and rise through the ranks, while experimenting on the side. But was that truly what I wanted to do? No, definitely not. I wanted no part in these politics and bullshit. Even as an alchemist, being part of the sect would mean interacting with cultivators, which I already had to do more than I'd like to. Not to mention, other alchemists might try to steal my recipes, or betray me, or just push me down a notch if I rise too fast. It was far too tedious. No, I'd instead be free. I had no intention of going against any elders or organization, but I wasn't going to be tied down either. What I needed was a lab of my own, where I could freely experiment as I pleased, research all I want, free from the concerns of the cultivator nonsense. I raised my head, taking a deep breath. The old man raised his hand. "No need, boy. I know that look. You have the spark I lacked as a youth, Lu Jie. Perhaps this truly was the path chosen by the heavens for you. I see your desire to learn, and it's not one to be bound under chains, but one that wishes to soar like a dragon in the open skies," the old man said, smiling. I scratched my nose, embarrassed by the heaps of praise. "I don't plan to go against the elders, Master. I have no desire for conflict. But I do not wish to be tied down by the sect. I would like to pursue my own craft and stand on my own 2 feet." Had this been anyone else, I wouldn't have let my thoughts out so openly. Yet, even in just a few days, I'd come to think of the old man as my master. And lying about this would have been an insult to him. There are free alchemists around, usually more merchants than alchemists. It's difficult to make it out on your own, Lu Jie. Not in these cities. The lords of the empire provide for the sects, and any new rising powers are crushed with impunity. I knew this already, with how the sect was structured to favor strength. Not just the sect, but the entire empire. It was strength that ruled in these lands. Competition was not tolerated. I'd be more than happy to live a quiet, comfortable life, pursuing my dream, Master. "I don't dream of any more than that," I said, and the old man nodded. "Very well, my disciple. You have chosen your path. As your master, all I can do is guide you along it. Let us begin the lesson." With a smile, I took out my little textbook, the now familiar scent of burning herbs and boiling elixirs touching my nose. I'll follow my dream and my path, one step at a time. Labby squeaked in my pouch, and I nudged his nose, trying to get him back in as I made my way. For some reason, Labby had been refusing to leave my side for a few days now. He'd climb on my shoulder, or even sit on my head sometimes as I went through my notes. I hadn't been able to tell why he was doing so. Nothing other than luring him with a pill or spirit herb would get him to leave me alone. I ducked my head, keeping my eyes on the ground as a cultivator walked by. I wasn't particularly afraid of the disciples in the outer sect, just simply preferred not to stand out or be remembered by anyone if I could help it. The fewer people knew me, the easier it would be to leave the sect when I had enough money. The thought made me smile, patting my other pouch containing the spirit pills I'd agreed to give to Su Lin in exchange for spirit herbs and a 3/4 share of what he got from the pills. The reason I was even doing so, despite having Labby, was threefold. Firstly, I didn't know anyone to sell my pills to. Trying to explain where I got them would be annoying, and I had a feeling Su Lin wouldn't care for the source so long as he got the pills. The second, even if I knew someone who I could sell to, I'd have no idea how much these pills would cost or how to get a good price for them. I wasn't a merchant or trader or anything, and Lu Jie had no encounters with alchemy pills or their prices, so his memory didn't help. Lastly, I just didn't want to get involved. Perhaps Su Lin would sell these to whatever merchant he knew, or there genuinely was some smuggling going on. Not like I cared enough to stick my foot in there either way. Being an outside source and creating my own pills meant what I was doing wasn't illegal by any means. There was the issue of Su Lin lying about how much the pills sold for, which is why I'd asked the old man how much they'd roughly go for. Though the prices tended to vary, 2 silver and 15 copper was his reply. Quite a bit more than I'd expected out of a single batch. If Su Lin planned to lie, I'd be able to tell. I suspected he wouldn't. Temptation, on the promise of higher-grade pills, would be much more beneficial for him to have a good relationship with me. I spotted Su Lin in the distance, down a side path under the shade of a tree. Following the way, Su Lin turned around and headed away when he noticed me. Stopping for a moment in confusion, I followed behind. The way took me around the corner, behind the sparring chambers into a small bamboo thicket. Wariness started to grip me, wondering if an ambush waited for me. Murder would be far too difficult to hide, and Su Lin didn't seem the type. Still, I kept my guard up. As if sensing my worries, Labby's chi flared. The little rat had grown a decent bit, though I suspected he was still not yet to the first realm. I gently patted his head, and he seemed to calm somewhat. "Do you have it?" Su Lin asked from farther ahead, his 2 crooked teeth showing as his nose twitched once. Definitely rat-like, though Labby was far more precious. "I do. Do you have the herbs?" I eyed Su Lin. He held a pouch, showing me the herbs. I stopped myself from snickering at how much this interaction felt like I was dealing drugs. Taking out my own pouch and opening the bag, I dropped the chi refilling pills in my hand. Su Lin's eyes widened. Unsurprising, it was difficult to get your hands on pills as an outer disciple. I suspected a lot of them would be willing to pay more than the pill's worth, just for the chance to cultivate better. It would make me money, but exploiting those disciples or getting involved with them was something I wanted to avoid. I held my hand out, handing the pills to Su Lin, and took my little herb bag. "I never knew you had it in you, Tia. I was expecting you to not show up today," Su Lin said, storing the pills. "3/4 of the money goes to me," I said, and the lanky fellow nodded once, snickering. "Cut yourself a hand on the key, perhaps?" "Nah, don't say it. I won't hear where you get these from." "You'll have the money by next week, when we meet," Su Lin said, walking farther into the grove. I sighed, feeling slightly exhausted from the interaction. It was tough being a cultivation drug dealer. "Let's go back, eh, Labby?" I said, and paused. Labby wasn't in my pouch. "Labby?" I called out, panic building up in my chest. I moved out of the grove, trying to sense Labby's chi, when I heard an ear-piercing shriek. I ran to where the noise came from, and, just a bit farther ahead, found Labby, frozen, with a half-eaten pill in his hand. A young girl stood with her fists bare, wearing intricate robes brimming with chi, clearly expensive. "What is that rat doing here?" the girl shrieked, her face red. Lightning crackled around her, rising with her shriek. My heart dropped into my gut. Lu Jie's memory informed me who she was. Yan Yun, the young prodigy of the inner sect, a famous young beauty, and the granddaughter of an elder. "Fuck me, Labby, you'll get us both killed." Chapter 8. Forbidden Love. Qi swirled in Yan Yun's dantian, her lightning arts crackling like a whip of power among her fists. A shudder went through her spine as she relived the sensation of the rat crawling up her leg to grab a pill from her pouch, and the murderous rage began to boil in her. She churned her chi, staring at the little rat and the confused boy. Both were frozen in front of her. "Is it yours?" Yan Yun asked, her voice clipped. There were very few things she hated. Snakes, insects, or such bothered her little. Pests couldn't hurt a cultivator. But rats were the one thing she despised. It stemmed from being bitten once as a young child, and the encounter gave her an unreasonable fear of rats she hadn't yet managed to overcome. The boy gulped once before he nodded. Yan Yun took a breath, modulating her chi as she cut off her thunder tempest arts. The boy hurriedly bowed his head, and the rat chittered, scurrying up the boy's pant leg. "Forgive me, senior sister. I'll keep a closer eye on him next time. It was my mistake." He clutched the little rat protectively. "He ate my pill," Yan Yun said, eliciting a wince from the boy. She would have normally felt pity, but she wasn't feeling charitable. "Whatever, forget about it," Yan Yun said, infusing her voice with qi. She clicked her tongue, her mood souring. She looked forward to the little respite she got at the end of every week when she escaped to the outer sect to finally be free of her grandfather's influence. But the heavens seemed set on spiting her today. Her mood further soured when the boy continued to just stand there instead of running off at her dismissal. She was about to say a few scathing remarks when something occurred to Yan Yun. "What are you doing all the way out here? Much less with a rat?" Yan Yun asked, her eyes briefly glancing at her surroundings. This section of the outer sect was one of her hidden places. A peaceful thicket filled with gentle, calm qi that soothed her nerves from the over-fraught training her grandfather put her through, and the lustful and bickering noble heirs and lords who kept eyeing her with distasteful eyes. Her hiding spot of respite. The little groves, this and a few others, were the only places she could escape to for some peace and quiet. To find others coming into these parts made her feel as if her private space had been invaded. Labby can search for spirit herbs and—" The boy trailed off, leaving the rest of his words unsaid. Yan Yun curled her eyebrows as she turned to look at the rat, now hiding in a pouch at the boy's waist. She extended her senses, inspecting the rat. Her eyes widened a bit. Her discipline kicked in, and any hints of surprise were erased. Yet Yan Yun still found herself staring at the rat and the minuscule amount of qi sitting inside it. She turned her stare to the boy as laughter began to well in her. A spirit rat, of all things? Yan Yun had never heard of such a thing in her life. Spirit animals tended to be serene and pristine, marvels to be coveted, and beacons of strength that thrived under nature's embrace. The rat, by comparison, was tiny, with black fur and a cowardly disposition, not to mention the meager amount of qi it held. Yet she wouldn't make a mockery of the boy or the rat. All under the heavens had their places, even rats, spirit animals or not. "Where did you find that spirit rat?" Yan Yun asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Well, Labby had been eating up stuff in my chamber, and one day I caught him doing that, that's how," the boy replied, scratching his head as he ducked his head awkwardly. Yan Yun snorted, amused by his reaction and the curious rodent. She could smell spirit herbs off the boy, their qi mixing almost imperceptibly with his own, as if he bathed in them every day. "What do you even do with all those herbs?" Yan Yun asked, her curiosity growing. There seemed to be something strange about this boy. I eat them?" the boy said, almost as if he was unsure of himself. Yan Yun almost coughed in surprise. You eat spirit herbs?" Yan Yun asked, horrified by his words. She knew that the outer sect disciples got few resources. To hear one of them simply ate the spirit herbs, not even utilizing their qi to cultivate. Yan Yun shuddered inside. "They taste pretty good, actually, and there's interesting ways you can cook them," he said, as if urging her to try them out. Yan Yun felt a headache mounting, the stupidity of the idea making the world spin. Why would anyone not make pills to further their cultivation and simply eat them as is? It made no sense. She found a smile breaking out, her discipline beginning to slip. "You are one strange boy," Yen Yun muttered, eyeing him. He looked to be older than her, around 20 or so if she were to guess. There was little remarkable to be noticed, aside from his cultivation being only at the peak of the third realm. She'd have thought him to be a former cultivator, working as a servant, if not for his outer sect robes. Yet, despite his simple appearance, something about his demeanor was strange. His eyes drifted around as he shuffled the rat that occasionally squeaked from his pouch. A quick glance had him looking back at her, with a very awkward smile sent her way that made the answer obvious. This man showed almost next to no interest in her. Yen Yun wasn't arrogant enough to believe herself the most beautiful person around, but both her bloodline and her high cultivation meant her youth was captured at its peak. It wasn't something she took pride in. If Yen Yun could trade her beauty for a quiet life, she'd do it in a heartbeat. Her beauty made her the target of many young men's courting attempts, and not all of them had been civil. It forced her to be better than her peers at all times, to remain a step ahead, as no man wished for their wives to be stronger or smarter than them. It forced her into cultivating, against her wishes, and live through the heavy expectations of her grandfather as he imposed lessons to be more feminine and to stop her rambunctious and tomboyish behavior. Yen Yun hated every moment of it. She had no interest in embroidery or to be married off to some noble by her grandfather. And so cultivation had been her respite, her struggle for freedom, which she desperately clung to. That was why it surprised her to no end to find the boy not eyeing her as all young men did, not turning lustful eyes away as they derobed her in their minds. She'd grown sensitive to such thoughts over the years, and the lack of which baffled her. Another thought hit Yen Yun. What if the boy was not interested in women? Yen Yun took another look at the secluded location she was in. She vaguely remembered sensing another presence nearby, one of the boys and another that had been distinctly male. Pieces began to fall together in Yen Yun's mind. A young boy, uninterested in women, with a quirky spirit rat and the habit of eating spirit herbs. A secluded location, and a tryst between two lovers that weren't meant to be. Yen Yun's chi began to pulse faster, golden lightning crackling in her eyes. Ideas upon ideas spun themselves together, tales of forbidden love spinning in her thoughts, seeing this boy in a completely new light. Had she just found herself interrupting a meeting between two hidden lovers? Yen Yun almost giggled out loud. A secret hobby of hers had been reading the romance between those of the same gender, and a hidden stash of books still remained in her closet to this day that she occasionally read through. Yen Yun coughed lightly when the boy started to slowly inch away from her. She'd gotten too excited, and her chi had flared up. "What's your name?" she asked, struggling to hold back her squeal of delight. The boy hesitated. "Lu Jie," the boy said, and his rat squeaked as if in agreement. Yen Yun felt the name was a bit bland, but not everything could be as per the books she'd read. "Lu Jie, I would normally ask you to not visit this place again, or to ever speak of it with anyone, as it's my private place for respite." Lu Jie nodded, gulping once. "But I have changed my mind. You can visit this little area, so long as you don't share its existence with anyone else outside of the other person who knows." She watched horror descend on the boy's face, and Yen Yun hurriedly reassured him. "Don't worry. I, Yen Yun, with the heavens as my witness, swear to treat your secret as if it were my own," Yen Yun exclaimed. Her chi flexed, and the oath was formed. She gave the boy what she thought to be a reassuring smile as she pushed down another delightful giggle threatening to burst out. Lu Jie, huh? She'd have to keep an eye on him. I stared at the crazy girl as she flashed me a smile, her eyes still glowing with what looked like electric sparks. I was torn between asking her to use her abilities to test if it followed normal electricity and just dashing the hell away from her. She'd talked about keeping my secret and even swore an oath to the heavens. Lu Jie's memory informed me that even a weak oath like that would set her back a month in her cultivation. Not something to be taken lightly. That baffled me all the more. Hadn't she just caught me red-handed? Hadn't Labby just stolen her alchemical pill? Why was she being so nice? Or, more accurately, crazy. I couldn't think of a single reason she'd not just tell this to her grandfather and get me kicked or crippled or whatever punishment the sect had in place. "You can go now," the girl said, waving her hand away. "Thank you, senior sister," I bowed, trying to sound as grateful as I could. It wasn't even a lie. I was very grateful to her for not ratting me out, but also extremely suspicious and creeped out. She'd just barged in and mostly just glared at me before her demeanor flipped around all of a sudden as she'd started smiling to herself. Whatever. Don't fuck with the crazies, as they say, especially if they have a high and mighty cultivation grandfather. The girl was trouble, and I wanted as little to do with her as I could. I hurried away, cursing Sulin for his quick escape, and Labby for pretty much being a drug-addicted lab rat. Labby squeaked, sinking into my pouch as he felt my emotions from my chi. I sighed, giving in as I bestowed some pets. I'd been too naive with Labby. Training was in order to teach him not to run off like that. Not only can it get me in trouble, but it may also just get him killed. I should be glad the girl didn't just straight up murder me. She was strong. That lightning chi made my arm hairs rise from its intensity. I shook my head, shelving the thoughts for another day. I was too tired. I set the pouch down, letting Labby out into my room. "It's all right, Labby. I just realized I need to pay more attention to you." Labby squeaked in reply before he ran off to some corner to do whatever he wanted to. A heavy sigh escaped me. Then I remembered the original purpose I'd went to all that trouble for. I dug out the spirit herbs from the pouch Sulin had given me. Qi spilled forth alongside the pleasant smell of the various assortment of spirit herbs, and a smile began to cover my face, my exhaustion already fading. A lot of fun experimentation awaited me, and I had no intention of letting any of these go to waste. Chapter 9. Experiments. A sheet-eating grin covered my face, standing in my messy room that had more area covered by random junk and notes than the floor itself. The porcelain bowl was filled with spirit grass in boiling water. The goal was to boil the essence from the spirit grass and examine its properties. I'd have preferred a test tube, but something like that would have to be specifically made by a glass worker, and I had nowhere near enough money for that. Glass was quite rare and a sign of wealth. Something to think about once I'd managed enough to set up my own lab and alchemy shop. I left the boiling porcelain bowl, moving aside to inspect the various spirit herbs I'd gotten. So far, I'd managed to make two broad distinctions in the types of herbs that Sulin provided. The first was the standard qi type of herb, a general plant with qi inside. The second, and more interesting, were the plants with special attunements and properties, like the prismatic lotus or the 7 poison spirit leaves and lightning ginseng that sparked every time I put qi through it. These plants displayed a trove of possibilities, and I wanted to test what was different in normal qi compared to attuned qi. Different though they may be, both spirit herb types shared a common factor of containing some form of qi. The difference between these and the regular plants I fed qi to was that these plants could absorb the qi from their surroundings, almost as a normal plant would absorb water and carbon dioxide. These absorbed qi. I was hoping to keep some and create a chamber completely devoid of qi and see if the herbs would survive in there or lose their magical properties. The thought that the plants were cultivating came to mind, yet I shot down the idea. From what I could tell from Lu Jie's memory, cultivation required the conscious channeling of qi. What the plants were doing was akin to something more along the lines of simply breathing and soaking in the qi instead of any guided cultivation. That did leave a wondering if some plants could cultivate, though. Did they even have a dantian? Animals could cultivate. Labby was a perfectly good example. The little rat didn't exactly know the concept of cultivating, but I'd found him channeling his qi on his own sometimes. Perhaps it was instinctual to animals in how they were supposed to cultivate. I hummed, turning to stare at the little pots with mostly regular and a couple of spirit plants sitting around. Another interesting thing I'd noticed was how difficult spirit plants were to grow. It made sense the sect had to create an area dedicated to them. Spirit grass I could grow anywhere, but something like the prism lotus or lightning ginseng was far too difficult. That's why I was testing with the spirit grass, to see if I could find something that could help me grow spirit herbs of my own. It'd solve most of my problems if I could source my own spirit herbs. Not only that, but set up a method of hastening their growth. I'd had a few opportunities to try, and I was starting to have a gnawing suspicion that my qi could increase the speed at which these herbs grew. The difference was minuscule, as after 2 weeks of supplying qi to one plant and not to the other, I'd found the one fed with qi to be a bit healthier and taller. This was no real indication that it happened due to my qi and not just genetics, so a group-based test with random assortments of plants will need to be done to verify it. If only I had a garden or something, and a lot more qi. This was the most tempted I'd ever been to try out cultivation. I'd even sat down one day just to see how it worked, and found my whole body itching as I shook my knees and wrists, unable to sit in place. Quite unsurprising, I'd never been able to just sit down and do nothing in my life. I had to be doing something. Tap my fingers, hum a tune, just something. Squeak! Labby ran into the room and rushed up my leg. Whoa, 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 calm down, little buddy, I said, as Labby clung fiercely to my body. I looked in the direction he'd come from to see what exactly had scared him so much. A ginger cat stalked closer, staring with wide eyes at me, not expecting to see something 5 times its size around. Ah, a cat. That makes sense, I suppose. I'd expect a spirit animal to be fine, though, I said, scratching Labby's head. He squeaked, his voice still nervous. I waved the cat away from my chamber, receiving a hateful glare from the animal. I can't let you eat my assistant and spirit herb detector just like that, I said to the cat, as it turned its butt toward me, sauntering away. You really need to stop getting into so much trouble, Labby, I said, as Labby calmed down a bit. I extended my palm, and Labby climbed on my arm and sat there. I smiled. The week after the encounter with the strange cultivator girl, I'd decided to train Labby a bit. He was smarter than even dogs and cats, I suspected, so there was no reason not to train him. Sit, I said, and Labby sat on his back legs, raising his front ones up. Roll. Labby lay down on my arm and rolled once. I pet his head, and the little rat squeaked once, adorably. I dug into my sleeves and pulled out a pill to give it to him. Good boy, I praised, as the rat dug into his treat. Maybe also bring me that spirit grass from there? His ears swiveled, and he jumped off in a single leap. Labby ran across the room, going up to my counter, grabbed a few grass leaves, and ran back to me. I smiled, shaking my head. What he'd brought was normal grass leaves. I'd kept it in the place I usually kept my spirit grass. I guess you're not that smart yet. Still pretty damn smart, though.
Labby stared at me for a moment before his attention was brought back to the pill in his hand, and the gluttonous rat began to chow down. Labby's actions were quite amusing. Aside from being extremely smart, the other little giveaways were how fluffy his fur was. Like you'd imagine a rat to be filthy and whatnot, but Labby looked like he went to a spa on a daily basis. I did still clean him once a week with some water and a brush, but there was definitely something unnatural about his fur. The second thing was how he didn't need to eat any food, which was somewhat similar to me. Just a few days ago, when stuck in my notes, it occurred to me I'd forgotten to eat or drink anything for 2 days straight. It was only when someone came to check in, thinking I'd died, that I'd realized how much time passed by. Perks of having a cultivator's body, I suppose, but I enjoyed eating things too much to give it up. The rattling of the porcelain cup alerted me that my spirit herb solution was prepared and ready to be messed around with. Removing the single spirit stone fueling the chi-based burner stove I'd created, it struck me that I grabbed the plate straight away. Guess I was fairly resistant to heat as a cultivator. I took out the fibrous strands of lifeless grass, leaving a sloshing, greenish water in the plate. Pouring some of the essence water in another dish, I put most of it in a porcelain bowl and closed the lid. Time to see just what makes you work. I sat down on the floor and began to channel my chi into the spirit essence water. The first and most obvious difference was the chi present in the water pushing against my own. I couldn't forcefully saturate it like normal water, as the essence of the spirit herb pushed back any attempts. Instead, I began to circulate my chi. For once, it was easier to do so, as I didn't have to forcefully calm my excitement. Something shifted in the essence of the chi present in the essence water. I tried to pay close attention as the still plate of water slowly but surely began to swirl. My excitement shot up, and I began to circulate my chi even faster. Something stirred in my mind. I followed my gut, closing my eyes to focus, and changed my chi circulation, splitting it in 2 parts. 2 circles swirled in 2 loops, one into the other, like a never-ending cycle. There was a strong shift in the chi around me, as if a vortex had been opened. The chi in the air began to be sucked into my body. I opened my eyes. The water swirled in a smooth manner, untouched by any force outside the circulation of my chi, as the essence of the water began to flow into me, helping me absorb even more chi than before. The results shocked me, breaking me out of my circulation method. I let the chi settle for a moment to inspect the water. I'd just made the water in this plate swirl without touching it, purely using my chi. There were far, far too many possible answers for this, but I put them away, rushing to my notes and jotted down my observations. Not only had the water swirled when I used the different method, but the essence in the water had seamlessly merged into my own chi the moment I'd begun to cultivate. Something about the essence helped me speed up my chi circulation. I scribbled more notes, grinning as I went back to the chi to try and induce another reaction. I swirled the chi near my hand, keeping my finger close to the dish, projecting it outward to rotate the essence water. A few seconds passed by, and I frowned, focusing harder and harder, but the water showed no reaction. Something was missing. Something about the method of cultivation itself?